In this extraordinary video, captured moments after landing, the amount of damage the airplane suffered is difficult to comprehend. An emergency evacuation of passengers who escaped injury has just been completed. Some injured passengers have still to be helped from the plane. How it flew for those 13 terrifying minutes seems astonishing. Captain Bob Schornsteimer is thanked by passengers who just minutes before had expected to die. The tension is released.
Boy, I just said, yes, baby. That's all I said. Pilot did a tremendous job.
Patricia Aubrey hugs her heroine, Michelle Honda.
I was crying, and of course everybody was traumatized, looking at the plane and looking at the people bleeding, and just, I kept touching myself, going, I'm here. I can't believe I'm still alive.
Her last-minute impulse to switch seats saves her from injury, maybe from death.
Something was telling me not to sit there, because I didn't have a good reason to move, you know. My guardian angel was tapping me on the shoulder and telling me to move.
A final desperate head count by Michelle Honda confirms the crew's worst fears. C.B. Lansing, the veteran of 37 years flying for this airline, is missing. A sea search begins in the area of ocean where the explosion took place. Neither body nor wreckage are found. Jane Sato Tomita has started to recover. 7 passengers are seriously hurt, the worst injury a skull fracture. But how have the rest survived? At the moment of decompression, it's just their seatbelts which made the difference between life and death.
They went poof, loud noise, and it just, the whole thing come apart. And I personally thought we were all gone. And we were fastened, all had our seatbelts fastened. Well, most of us evidently, or would have lost a lot more.
But there's something else. At the most critical moment, Maui's notorious high winds died away.
I was amazed to see in front of the fuselage missing. What was so funny about the whole thing is that when it came in, had no wind. I mean, I believe if you did have that wind, the aircraft wouldn't have made it. It would have split into 2 pieces. And it's a miracle. It's very much a miracle.
This is one of the most remarkable flying events in history. No airplane has ever landed with this amount of damage. The only thing that was holding the forward section cockpit to the rest of the fuselage were the floor beams. Basically, they were hanging by a thread.
From a close study of the fuselage, crash investigators tried to determine how the airplane structure remained in one piece. The critical factor proves to be the precise location of the explosion.
The thing that saved them was that because the damage was across the top of the airplane, as the nose tried to bend down, these members through here are in tension, and it kept them in line and kept them straight. So even though it was almost ready to break off, the structure was still strong enough here to keep it together. If this damage had been along the bottom and the nose is trying to bend down this way, the structure would have been, this similar structure would have been in compression, and it would have buckled, and the nose would have certainly come off. So it was fortunate that the damage was across the top.
How does the roof of a jet airliner simply blow away? The US National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is tasked with discovering what happened. Investigators pull the airplane's records, something like an automobile service history, and suspicion falls right away on the airplane itself. The best evidence for what happened, the missing fuselage section, is now lying at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. But by carefully piecing together the clues they do have, investigators hope to solve one of the most spectacular accidents of all time. In the 38 years since its launch in 1967, more than 5,000 737s were sold. Somewhere in the world, a 737 takes off every 5 seconds. The accident airplane was number 152 off the production line, delivered in May 1969. The airplane was designed for a 20-year service life and 75,000 flights. This one had exceeded that number, though many were of short duration. Its fuselage was under constant stress because of pressurization.
The fuselage of the airplane is actually breathing. It expands and contracts depending on altitude. When it's on the ground, it's in a contracted status. When it's at altitude, 24,000 feet, the fuselage expands, so the airplane is constantly cycling. That's pressurization. That will weaken the structure over a long period of time. And given the history of this airplane being a very high cycle airplane, that probably had something to do with weakening the structure of the fuselage.
With thousands of 737s taking to the skies each day, investigators need to be certain what made this one burst apart. An Aloha Airlines Boeing 737 bursts apart in mid-air over Hawaii. After 13 extraordinary minutes in the air, it makes an emergency landing on the island of Maui. Investigators need to discover what caused this spectacular incident. In Washington, D.C., Jim Wildey is one of the NTSB team who worked the case. His expertise as a metallurgist proves crucial.
I got a call about 2 in the morning, in the middle of the night, from my boss, and there had been an accident in Hawaii. They were putting the team together. I hopped on a plane and went to Hawaii.
He takes samples from the remaining fuselage and back in the lab discovers something barely visible to the naked eye. Hairline cracks like this, beside the holes where rivets had been. Figuring out how those cracks came to be there means going back to basics, to the way the Boeing 737 was put together. Airplanes are built from many separate panels. Where they overlap, they're bonded together by a powerful adhesive known as epoxy. Rivets hold the panels tight together while the epoxy sets hard. On the Aloha airplane, there's telltale discoloration inside the overlapping joints. Here is the vital clue.
You can see now where the dark material is the epoxy that was used to bond the 2 layers of the lap joint together. The white material you see here is corrosion damage of the aluminum fuselage skin. So the original intent was that the stress that's trying to pull one skin away from the other skin piece, the stresses would go through the bonding and not through the rivets. Of course, as this thing becomes disbonded, now the rivets themselves are loaded, and especially this top row of rivets, and this is the row of rivets we think that had the fatigue cracking in it that led to the eventual opening of the roof structure on the Aloha 737 airplane.
The files reveal that Boeing warned airlines, including Aloha, of problems with some early 737s. If the epoxy isn't applied at exactly the right temperature, if the panels have moisture or dirt on them, the bonding can fail. In warnings and service bulletins, some issued over 15 years earlier, Boeing spells out the danger. The Hawaii climate with humid and salt-laden air helps corrosion to occur. But instead of grounding airplanes for a nose-to-tail examination, Aloha has inspectors make occasional checks, often at night, when those on duty are least alert, working under artificial light. Those tiny cracks escape detection.
These cracks go unrepaired, and now you have an airplane that is a ticking time bomb.
There are other problems. Boeing's service bulletins and what are called airworthiness directives issued by the Federal Aviation Administration are often difficult to understand.
Airworthiness directives are very complex and read like a legal document. Aloha needed to have someone who could read that document and interpret it into plain English for the mechanics, the wrench turners. That never happened.
An airplane that has been worked so hard, serviced by mechanics who don't fully understand the briefings, is a recipe for disaster. Investigators now believe they know why the airplane burst open, but they don't yet know how.
I was flying back from Hawaii to Los Angeles, and while I was in the air, I got a message that that we needed to interview this passenger who had apparently seen a crack as she was getting on the accident flight.
You saw something as you got on this airplane, which you pointed out to your roommate.
Cynthia Johnson.
Yeah, Cynthia. Talk me through it. What did you see?
What I saw was to the right of the door, where the paint was white. Well, it was a crack. It was like, not a hole exactly, but the metal on top had come away from the metal below. I was going to tell the flight attendant, but they were busy and we had to take our seats.
Oh, yeah, you figured, they know what they're doing. It's their airplane.
I didn't want to make a fuss or anything.
No, absolutely.
The witness saw cracking in this area, and we found fatigue cracking back in here. So this is the line where the fatigue cracking joined up. One piece came down this way and folded off, and the other piece went across the top and came off to the right side.
But something still doesn't make sense. Boeing designed the 737 and other of its aircraft so that this should never happen. Every 10 inches along the airplane are what are called tear straps inside the fuselage to strengthen it. If a tear begins, it should only reach the next strap before shooting off at a 90-degree angle. Though there's a hole in the aircraft, it acts like a safety valve.
The purpose of the tear strip is to confine any kind of rip or tear in the fuselage skin to a 10-inch square, basically. If you allow it to propagate beyond this 10-inch square, you could then compromise larger sections of the fuselage and cause a blowout. The 10-inch square allows a controlled decompression and confines any structural damage to a very small area.
So why has the safety valve failed here? The NTSB believe there were so many cracks in the fuselage that they simply joined together, running right through the tear straps.
The Aloha airplane was kind of unique in a couple of ways. The way it was operated was with very short flights, so you had large numbers of these pressurization cycles, and stress was going on and off on these rivet locations. And secondly, with the disc bonding, all this stress is now going through the rivets, and that led to the linking up of these cracks and then the roof coming off the airplane.
But is that the final answer on what happened to Flight 243? A new theory claims to shed fresh light on those dramatic events. Matt Austin is an engineer who lives in Honolulu. The story of Flight 243 both appalls and fascinates him.
I flew very regularly on Aloha Airlines, and I'd been on that plane about a week before it actually lost the roof. You could tell that something was loose in the airplane. It's just like when you're in an old car and you hit a bump, you can hear the rattles in it that you won't hear in a new aircraft. In this case, when the aircraft landed, there would be noises and rattles you wouldn't hear on a newer aircraft.
He begins his own investigation, scrutinizing the 4,000 pages of evidence and photographs gathered during the official inquiry.
I am an expert in explosion dynamics and how pressure vessels explode, what causes them to explode, which way the cracks run as they're coming apart. In the case of the Aloha accident, the main focus from the aeronautical industry was they were looking at it as an airplane structural failure, whereas I analyzed it from the point of view of a pressure vessel failure.
As he reviews the evidence, one question keeps recurring. Why is CB Lansing sucked out of the aircraft and not her colleague Jane Sato Tomita? Jane was further forward than CB at the crucial moment. Jane was at row 2. CB was at row 5. The NTSB believes the roof separation began near row 3. Passenger testimony gathered shortly after the incident suggests that CB Lansing was sucked upwards and to the left, but not forward.
I was on the aisle, on the right. So I look up from my magazine, I see a pair of legs go up and out on the left, just back of first class. From where I was, if the nose was 12, this is at 11, yeah?
Forensic evidence suggests another possible scenario. Michael Sweet, an ex-cop, is now a specialist in blood spatter analysis. By studying bloodstains at crime scenes, he can help put a killer behind bars or free the innocent. He examines official photographs of the 737 fuselage.
This is a large photograph of the left side of the airplane. The front would be in this location. There's what we suspect to be a bloodstain pattern on the right beside the window, right here.
Could this bloodstain be where CB Lansing's head impacted with the outside of the fuselage? The analyst believes so.
Well, the fact that there are bloodstains on the side of this airplane suggests to me that the blood source in this case was momentarily trapped when it came into contact with the side of the airplane. If the flight attendant in this case was ejected outside of a gaping hole, I would expect her to disappear almost immediately and not leave any bloodstains on the side of the airplane.
This analysis suggests only that she was trapped, but without explaining how or why. Matt Austin believes he has the answer. On April the 28th, 1988, a Boeing 737 owned by Aloha Airlines in Hawaii suffers an explosive decompression in midair. Amazingly, it lands safely with the loss of one crew member. Investigators blame metal fatigue due to poor maintenance. But a new and controversial theory has emerged, challenging at least part of the chain of events. What if a safety hole has opened up as it was designed to do, but directly above the flight attendant? Matt Austin believes CB Lansing is sucked into the safety hole, momentarily blocking it.
All of the air that's trying to escape has no place to go, so it built up a huge pressure spike, and that's what blew the roof off the top of the airplane.
What he's describing is known as a fluid hammer. In scientific terms, air is fluid, as is water. Here's a simple demonstration in a bathtub.
The water is in fact escaping through the drain. As we move the drain plug back down toward the hole, it will immediately slam shut and create a force, which is a simple example of a fluid hammer.
He believes this phenomenon, on a giant scale, caused the accident.
It's very tragic, but if we don't look at the forensic evidence that's left, then we won't understand exactly what caused the explosive decompression and possibly prevent a future occurrence.
The NTSB say that the fluid hammer theory is valid scientifically, but for them the evidence still points to something simpler, a virtually simultaneous failure in the airplane's many weak spots.
The Safety Board's investigations are never really closed. We always would take into account any new information that comes out. I believe in the case of the Aloha accident, we have not changed our probable cause, and we still are sticking with the probable cause as we determined back in 1988.
Since the crucial physical evidence was never found, what happened on board at the precise moment of explosion will probably never be known. Aloha Airlines management took most of the blame for their poor maintenance regime. The NTSB demanded that the Federal Aviation Administration do a much better job enforcing maintenance standards. Boeing had already improved their manufacturing process to prevent the adhesive becoming so easily contaminated. What happened on Flight 243 made flying safer. Soon after, Congress passed the Aviation Safety Research Act.
This accident had a very profound effect on the aviation industry and the way we look at aging airplanes, old aircraft. We changed the way we monitor how they age, the way we inspect them, and of course now how we manufacture them. We use different processes. This was a very critical accident for aviation history.
Those 13 terrifying minutes also left their impact on the survivors of Flight 243.
I had to go through a healing process. I took fear of flying classes, and the old saying of you fall off a horse and you get back on it is very accurate, but it's a lot tougher to actually do it.
Patricia Aubrey had to find a way of dealing with the memories also. Her way was to revisit the same piece of airspace where the terror unfolded.
I go flying with my psychologist. You go through what they call desensitization, where you confront your fear and you just do it so many times that you can do it without having a bad reaction. Before that happened, if something bad happened to me, I'd go, I hate life. But I don't hate life. I can deal with it. Bring it on. I'll take care of it. I'd much rather be alive.
There's one further legacy of that fateful day. the ocean never did surrender the body of C.B. Lansing. Instead, a memorial garden honoring the veteran flight attendant was planted at Honolulu Airport, beneath the big Hawaiian sky where she spent the better part of her life, and where it was so suddenly ended.